Yes. Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. It's so good to see you all. My name is Joe Noriel. I'm part of a group called the History Connection. And that group's main charge is to recognize those individuals who have really outdone themselves as far as representing their country. And there's just so many of you out there, so I thank you all for coming here today. Before we start the ceremony, please, a big round of applause for John Shemp and Troop 9. Thank you so much, guys. We want to thank Lori and Cynthia, Valley Orchards, for letting us host the event here. John Merrill, Petaluma Community Access. Patriot Guard, thank you so much, Ron, for bringing the group out. Members of the City Council, David Glass, Mike Harris, thank you for coming, and friends and guests. This award today is in part to recognize all those individuals who played a role in World War II, serving their country or otherwise. We remember you, honor you, and are forever grateful for your efforts for our freedom. Many of you in the audience have been individually affected by the events of World War II in different ways, but today we all come together to share that moment in history and be grateful to be together and for its ultimate outcome. It's now our job to share these stories with the younger generation so the tragedy of war will not be forgotten. We're in very, very good company here today, and I'm going to recognize some of the people that I've met already. But first, an individual who can't be with us today, who I plan to recognize, and that's Mr. Bob Essig. He was a B-24 pilot. He served his country admirably. He was on photo reconnaissance missions, so many of you know there was no fighter escorts. It was interesting, Bob's ball turret gunner was a gentleman by the name of Sergeant Tony Marchione. He died in Tokyo over 1945, and he was the last man to die in World War II. Bob passed away last week, so if we could, I'd like to have a moment of silence for him. Thank you. And in the audience, I'd like to recognize Paul Lyon. Paul? Paul was a B-24 pilot, served 25 combat missions, served near the Eastern Front in Europe. Paul, did you want to say a couple of words?
Hello.
Say anything?
Only one word.
Hello again.
Get tongue-tied, do you?
We also have a special guest in here, Mr. Cliff DeWitt. He was a B-17 co-pilot. He was shot down over Germany, was a POW. Thank you so much for your service. Joe Sullivan, there he is back there. Joe was a waist gunner. He served in the Pacific. We thank you so much for your service. Please. And sir, I'd like to recognize you.
Bob Jacoby,
Bob, would you sir?
Omaha Beach and Battle of the Bulge.
Thank you, sir. And we know the war impacted a lot of different people. I'd like to recognize a very special friend of mine and a guest, Alexander Sachal. He was part of the Russian army. He escaped numerous concentration camps. He's got the shrapnel in his body to prove it as an international artist. So thank you, Sachal. And a special thanks. Many of you may or may not know, but my mother was in Germany. She was a teenager in Berlin when the bombs fell, and she survived, and that's Walter Noriel in the back. Thank you. How do I best describe what these heroes have done? I'm reading a book, fortunately, called Masters of the Air, and if I could, I'd just like to read a short passage. I think it kind of sums up what these men went through. Fighting at 25,000 feet in thin, freezing air that no warriors have ever encountered before. Bomber crews battled new kinds of assault on body and mind. Air combat was deadly but intermittent. Periods of inactivity and anxiety were followed by short bursts of fire and fear. Unlike infantrymen, bomber boys slept on clean sheets, drank beer in local pubs, and danced to the swing music of Glenn Miller's Air Force Band, which toured U.S. air bases in England. But they had a much greater chance of dying than ground soldiers. In 1943, an American bomber crewman stood only a 1 in 5 chance of surviving his tour of duty, 25 missions. The 8th Air Force lost more men in the war than the U.S. Marine Corps. So they were scheduled for 25 missions, these 10 men, but statistically, it was only 14 missions. So we're grateful to still have them here today. With that, I'd like to turn the mic over to our Honorable Mayor, David Glass, to read the proclamation.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here today. I come from an aviation family. My brother served in the United States Navy and in the United States Marine Corps. He started out enlisted in the Navy, went back to school after fulfilling that commitment with a year of additional college, and went back and flew out tours at the end of Vietnam in the Marine Corps. My younger brother went through Quantico while he was in college and served in the United States Marine Corps and went on and retired from Delta and Northwest Airlines as a captain on a 747, and actually served by flying the troops in and out of the Middle East during our conflicts there with Desert Storm. While we were waiting for the arrival here, I like coming to these events. I have a great deal of respect for the veterans, and often it comes up, who's a veteran, who's not. I'm not. I had a birth defect that was surgically repaired in 1986. It still wouldn't allow me to serve in the service. But if anything, the experience from my brothers, particularly my older brother with whom I'm extremely close and we're very close in age, gives me a profound effect for what these folks went through, and particularly aviators. And there's an old saying amongst aviators that there are old aviators and there are no old aviators. That's kind of a George Bush moment for me. I kind of butchered that. But this is proof that there's exceptions to every rule, because it doesn't get any bolder, it doesn't get any more brave than going up there in a combat mission and running multiple missions and surviving to come back and live the fruits of the labor of that victory while you see your best friends sacrificed. I can never forget my brother telling me the shock it was for him when he went back into a briefing room and they just took somebody's name and erased it from the blackboard who had not come back from the mission, and then that person was out of sight, out of mind, and never really talked about again. So these events are important. It's why I celebrate the fact that we have them, where we bring people together to remember what America's greatest generation did do for this country when the freedom of the world was actually hanging in the balance. And so, sir, with that, it is an extreme pleasure to read this proclamation from the city of Petaluma. Whereas, in the dark days of World War II, air power was the only way of striking back at Hitler's Nazi Germany. And whereas those brave young men called to serve their country in B-17 bombers suffered the highest casualty rate of the war. And whereas it was a high price to pay for their bravery, as 1 out of 3 crewmen would not survive their missions. And whereas Phil Arnot would serve 22 missions as co-pilot of a B-17 Flying Fortress that penetrated deep into enemy territory. And whereas Mr. Arnot would receive France's highest honor, the Legion of Honor Medal for his valor. Now therefore be it resolved that I, David Glass, Mayor of Petaluma, along with every member of the Petaluma City Council, do hereby honorably proclaim this day, Saturday, August 17th, 2013, as Phil Arnot Day here in the city of Petaluma, and wish to thank Mr. Arnot for his bravery and service to our country. His contributions have assured that all Americans can live in peace and in freedom in their own country today. Thank you, sir, very much.
Can I say a few words?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm truly honored. I'm not sure that I should be singled out with these gentlemen to my right here who was a B-24 pilot. There was a rivalry between the B-24's pilots and the B-17 pilots, and we used to say that the B-24 was the box the B-17 came in, and I think you had a retort that sort of equaled the score. And I want to acknowledge the other veterans here and salute and applaud them. And particularly this gentleman here, whose name I missed, who was on Omaha Beach in the Battle of the Bulge. And he proves that there is such a thing as luck, good, or that fate can be kind in this world. You, sir. It's incredible. I was very, very lucky. Planes went down around me. Sometimes people came back with dead or wounded on board because the flak would burst, and as some of you former pilots know, flak would come, pieces of shrapnel or flak would come into the plane and hit someone, wound them or kill them, or break the fuel lines or hydraulic lines. And I do remember planes coming in ahead of us firing flares, meaning dead or wounded on board, with ambulances and fire trucks racing on either side just in case something happened to the plane after it landed. I did see a guy come in with 2 engines knocked out on one side. I think he had a flat tire. He's firing red flares. I was already had landed, and he was limping behind the main formation because it couldn't keep up. And he made it. And so I said, I was very lucky. Having flown 5 missions in a row, my crew was given a rest. But Stanley Burns of Sacramento, who had trained with me in the United States, and I knew him, we were good friends. On one mission he said, Phil, I can't go. The flight surgeon has told me my cold is too bad. He doesn't want me to go. Do you want to take my place? And I thought, yeah, I'll go. I'll get credit for the mission, so sure. I go down to the briefing and Stan is there and he says, oh, Arnot, I forgot, my cold is better. And I said, don't worry about it, Stan, I'll just go back to the back to the barracks and go to sleep. And now this is around 2 or 3 in the morning, because we always took off in darkness and flew straight east into the rising sun over Holland. So I go back to the barracks, and I learned later that his plane was shot down. He, however, was one of 2 who survived, because he bailed out on the water in the North Sea. He told me later when he got back to the base, he was, again, one of 2 who survived on the 9, because the British Air Sea Rescue in choppy waters couldn't find the others. And he said the last thing he saw was a launch approaching, and then he passed out. The next thing he knew, he was in the launch being worked on. And I felt a little like the guy who missed if there was a guy who missed the Titanic. That's how I felt, because it would have been me. And he was more heavily set than I, and I was lighter then than I am now, and I don't think I would have lasted very long in that water. You're right, Joe. The casualties, I did not know it at the time. I've read it since, that the casualties were very heavy. We did have a nice place to sleep. We had good food if we got through with a mission. But if we didn't, well, we'd have to bail out over Germany, which would not be probably a pleasant experience. But we were told that if we had to bail out over Germany, if we had any option at all to surrender to the German Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, because it was believed that the anti-Nazi elements were in the Luftwaffe. And I don't know how, if I'd had to bail out in Germany, how I was going to figure out who was in the Luftwaffe. Excuse me, sir, are you in the Gestapo or are you in the Luftwaffe? And Mein Sprechen Sie Deutsch is about as much German as I knew. Fortunately, I didn't, because I was so lucky, I never had to do that. I met a friend after the war, a guy after the war, Tom Beamer, his name was. He was a P-51 fighter pilot. And he was on the deck strafing German flak towers for our benefit upstairs. Because if we could knock out flak towers, then we would have a little less anti-aircraft fire bursting around us. And he apparently caught ground fire. He was on the deck, and his plane was on fire, so we had to pull up to a minimum altitude to bail out. Now this story he's telling me after the war, and I didn't know him during the war. And he said he bailed out at the minimum altitude, pulled the ripcord, pulled it too soon. It caught in the tail but broke free. And he sailed down too fast, hit a tree, and was pretty sure his leg was broken. He managed to get down, and a group of farmers came up with farming implements, and he knew they were going to kill him. Because Hitler had told the German civilians, if at all possible, you kill Allied pilots who bail out. He didn't want to give that order to the military because there were German prisoners of war, many of them in Arizona in the United States or elsewhere in the United States. And so the farmers came up, and he knew they were going to kill him, and suddenly he hears the wah, 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 the European siren, and up comes a Luftwaffe staff car. An officer jumps out, and he tells the German farmers in German, "Get out." And then in perfect English, he said to Tom, "Lieutenant, I'll have an ambulance here, and we'll take care of you." Tom said, they said the bone, they only asked for his name, rank, and serial number, so he didn't have to give any other information. And he was well taken care of, and he lucked out. And as you know, sir, luck, fate, call it what you want to, is a big factor in life. I want to thank the mayor, Joe, and all of you. I'm so honored, and I'll remember this day for a long time. Thank you very much.
I wonder if anyone has any questions for Mr. Arnot.
Not all at once.
I just want to thank the United States Army Air Force and Belgium, Christmas Day, 1945. We were running out of ammunition, food, freezing to death, and we looked up, and there were boys coming over, and you should have heard the cheering. We were beat, and that just brought everybody up.
But they dropped food up before.
Yeah, food and equipment.
And that was always a big problem with the infantry.
Food. Well, the fog had grounded all the planes, they couldn't fly. It was just that Christmas Day they came in.
And that is what gave Hitler the opening to launch the attack that led to the Battle of the Bulge, because the Allied aircraft couldn't function because the German meteorologists, who were pretty good, had forecast 7 or 8 days of heavy groundfall. So our aircraft couldn't support you.
Right.
Phil, would you mind mentioning a little bit of your career after the military? Many may or may not know that he's an author of a few books on the wilderness of this area.
I always remember the last lecture. I was 21. Was I 21? Yes, I went in at 18. I was 21. April of 46. 3 more months, I'd be 22. And it was the last lecture. And the colonel was encouraging us to re-enlist for 6 years. All the perks, you know, we travel and beautiful women all over the world and so on. But I wanted to go back to college, but ready to learn for the first time in my life. In high school, I'd been a grade grabber to stay eligible for track, because I majored in track and minored in soccer, though I did study. And this time I wanted to learn, and I wanted to go to college, and I still wanted to run on the track and even play soccer. So I did. And I wasn't sure what I was going to be, and I finally decided I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach, among other things, about the reality of war. That it's not Sylvester Stallone hacking his way with a machete through the enemy with the background music. It's not glorious. It's not fun. It's brutal and savage. And so among other subjects. So I went back and I taught school for 28 years, but I needed to support my young family. And a YMCA director called me over to see if I would start a hiking club. And I said, well, I'm Jack Rolander, and I'm too busy right now, and I'd love to, but I can't. I took 2 steps out of the office and it hit me. The summer's free. I have to supplement my income as a teacher. Maybe I could lead backpacking groups. I'd done a lot of mountaineering right after the war. So he said, yes, write it up. I did, the board approved it, and so I led over 25 years, 17 2-week backpacking trips in the Sierra Nevada and the Cascades of Oregon and Washington. Then upon allegedly retiring at 55, I fell into work with, we're in college leading backpacking groups, and over quite a period of time I led, I think, 22. So I've led about 81 extended backpacking trips from 7 to 21 days, and then done it on my own with my partner Sandy, who's over here in red, and it's been the best part of my life. Talk about luck. I'm Mr. Luck. I really am. I'm born the right time, the right parents, got through the war without a scratch, could very well not be here, and I've had a very wonderful life, and I still am. So, and you mentioned books. My high school composition teacher all but said, "Phil, you'll never write anything but your name." Well, I made her roll over in her grave. I have written 4 or 5 books strictly on the wilderness. 2 on Point Reyes, 1 on the Sierra Nevada. One is on a series of ghost stories that I made up around the campfire that which really scare people. I mean, I would have been a good CIA agent, you know. And so then I did a photo essay called Mystique of the Wilderness, which is a personal statement on the wilderness. It's the spirituality and the beauty. I did it in '78. I'm now working to do a 2nd edition, and it's done, but getting the right publisher, etc. And I won't bore you with the details. That's slowing things up. But it's been a lot of fun doing those. And my publisher published also a book on running, because I was a competitive runner in high school and college. And when I was teaching, I ran during the lunch hour. Teachers were great on meetings, but they couldn't touch me at the lunch hour. The state code had a number saying a teacher's free for a lunch hour. So I ran during my lunch hour. And I didn't do it because it was smart, which it is. I just did it because I was compulsive about it. And it seems to have paid off, because I'm going to be 39 pretty soon. Okay, John?
What was the name of the second book that you wrote?
Point Reyes, Secret Places, Magic Moments. It's about the less known places to see at a certain time of day, season of the year. It's my favorite of the 2. The other one was more a trail guide. But in the second one, I really wanted to describe what there is to see that's unusual and feel. Because for me, the wilderness has a feel about it. And I did one, the High Sierra John Muir's Range of Light. I've spent a lot of time in the Sierra Nevada. For me, that's the best one I did, because it's really an experiential guide. I describe certain places which are off trail and beautiful, though you do have to take a trail to get there. So it was a lot of fun writing it. It's still out. Okay, it's called the High Sierra John Muir's Range of Light. Yeah.
And there's really some amazing images. Those of you who are web savvy, philarnot.com, his website, there's some incredible stuff on there. With that, thank you so much for attending. If you're interested in some of the stuff we're doing, historyconnection.net, astronaut Rex Walheim will be here, space shuttle astronaut. He'll be out next month. In October, the Vietnam Memorial Traveling Walls coming to town. So thank you again for coming.
No, I mean, it's interesting that they have to travel.
And the parade, Joe. Your refreshments up here too, the cookies.